So I'm Henrik Lindberg from Cloudsmith, and I'm going to talk about Geppetto, which is a tool for developing Puppet, so an IDE for Puppet. And what I like to do is to take you way back to the beginning and not start with Geppetto 3.0. And by the beginning, I'm taking you to the wrong slide. I should have taken you to that slide. More specifically, I'm taking you all the way back to the year 1889, which wasn't all that long ago, but you know what happened in 1889? That was the first number of Wall Street Journal was published. It was published on pink paper, and since then, all business papers were printed in pink. That's good to know, right? In 1889, the Eiffel Tower was inaugurated. It was the entrance of the Paris World Fair. And in April this year, Charlie Chaplin and Adolf Hitler were born. Right? I think just a few weeks apart. And you know what this is? This is a Hafunda card. And it was published by a company that was founded in 1889 called Nintendo. So they've been a gaming company since 1889. And for us in the Nordic area, this person died. Any clue who that might be? Not Jenny Lind, but close. It's Elvira Madigan. So Elvira Madigan and her Lieutenant Sparrow, they killed themselves in unhappy love. Huge scandal. And ever since then, we've been hearing the ballad about Elvira Madigan played badly on accordion as we're driving around in the subway. Right? So all of these things were happening in 1889, just to set the scene a little bit. But more specifically, I wanted to talk about one specific morning in the life of this person. This is Herman. And Herman woke up this morning, and he hadn't been sleeping very well because he was thinking about a problem, and he had a really hard problem to solve. Herman was working as a statistician, that is, for the US Bureau of Census. And the US Bureau of Census, they're conducting a census every 10 years. In Swedish, that's folkräkning. So counting all the US citizens and keeping statistics about that. And his problem was that they just did a census. They did one in 9 years ago, which they just finished. So they just managed to barely finish this in time of the next count. And they expected there to be a lot more Americans this time. There were about 50 million in the last count, and they didn't know how many there were going to be. Later they found out it was 63 million in the count that was going to happen in 1890. But his problem was that the government thought that they had spent far too much money on the last census, so now he was faced with the problem of doing more with less. And I'm sure that that's an expression we also have since 1889. So he had to come up with a solution to this. And this day, he was going to Washington to explain how this was going to happen. And he had absolutely no clue. And on this train, he didn't get that much peace and quiet. Until a little bit later, when he was sitting down, this man came along. And in fact, he's the reason why we are all here in this industry and doing these things. And you may wonder why, or you've already figured it out, what it was all about. Well, he asked Herman for his ticket. He handed his ticket over, and the conductor made some holes in this piece of paper. And all of a sudden, Herman had a revelation, and he knew how he was going to solve the problem with the next census. And this was Herman's invention. And this is what they used in the 1890 census. They encoded all the answers to the questions they were asking people, and then they figured out that they could punch holes in cards like these. And then he figured out, well, to be able to do something with that, you need machinery that can automate the reading. So what did he do next? Well, he was going to build his own hardware company. And if you're going to build a hardware company, you have to look the part. He was considering a neck beard, but it was more fashionable with a mustache in 1889. So that's what he did. And more specifically, he built a machine called the tabulating machine, which was the mechanical device with which all these cards were then counted. And they finished the census in record time. It was a 10x performance boost. It was finished in under 1 year with far fewer staff that they had been using for the previous census. And they came up with that it was like 63 million people in the US, which was actually far below the expectations. They thought it was well over 70 million. So how does that relate to Puppet and Geppetto and Puppet Camp? Well, that's easy. Automation makes IT better. Using tooling, using automation is really the way to get performance in your systems. So switching to Geppetto. So what's Geppetto? Before asking that, how many here have been using Geppetto? 1, 2, 3, 4, 15 or so. Cool. And we've had the 3 release came out sometime before Christmas. And so quite a lot of downloads. We have about 7,000 or so downloads in total of Geppetto. So it's quite a lot of users everywhere. So what's in Geppetto? You get editors for Puppet manifests and module metadata. And while you're editing, it's doing incremental validation of everything. If there's something in the syntax that's wrong, but it also checks stylistic things, problematic statements that although correct, it might not be what you want, and things like that. And that's all configurable. It's also doing referential checking, so if you're referring to types that do not exist or functions that do not exist and things like that, it will tell you that that thing is not present in the environment. It offers quick fixes, so if you spell the function wrong, Geppetto guesses and suggests other functions that have names that are similar, so you can fix your problems immediately. There's code completion, syntax-wise, as well as looking up values of things. There's some project wizards, so you can instantiate new projects. You can get things from Forge. That was the next one. And new in 3.0 is pretty printing, so you can format your source code, and you can affect the rules that formats the source and aligns things. A little bit just before doing demo about Geppetto packaging. You can download a working Geppetto and just unzip it and run it for many platforms. So all in one download, ready to use. It's integrated with Git and has a Subversion also supported. Or you can install it as Eclipse plugins. So it runs on Linux and Windows and OS X. It's available in 32 and 64-bit versions. And the source is it's open source, Apache, EPL. The project lives on GitHub, and that's also where we do all our issue tracking and stuff like that. So it's easy to get to. Now, demo. Standard Eclipse stuff, I'm not going to show that. I'm just going to show a couple of things in the files I have prepared here. So I have various projects here, and they are Puppet projects. As you see the 3 little dots there that marks that this project is about Puppet things. So it knows about manifests. If I spell something wrong, I have a debug function here, and I spell that debug or something. It gives me immediately an error marker, and it tells me what's wrong. And I can see, if I click on this, did you mean debug or defined or something else that thinks is close? And I can click on that to get it fixed, and then the error disappears immediately. Same thing, of course, if I spell Onyx instead of owner or something, it helps me with finding that. And if I want to, I can complete it. When I'm typing and I say O W or C, O, or let's say M something, mode or M time. It suggests the various things that you can say here. And now I have mode twice. That's not good. You can't do that. So let's put that back. Stuff like that. If the file isn't there, of course, you can imagine it tells me that's not a thing that is supported. So you have stuff like that, and you have an integrated problems view. So if something is wrong, it shows up in the problems view. But it does that when you're saving. So you have a collection of all the problems, and if you click on something here, it immediately navigates to that, so you can browse through everything. Those kinds of problems are being fixed. And speaking of navigation, you can also find and navigate to things if you have stuff like this where it says fix me or to do or seriously this must be changed, fix me. It collects all of those notes in your code. And so you have down here, you see at the bottom here, you have a task view, and it marks them with exclamation points. If it says like fix me, bang, it shows up as more important. And then if you find something here, you can click on that, it'll immediately jump to that place in code. So Geppetto scans all the code, builds everything, shows you all the errors, all the problems, all the to-dos and fix me markers, etc. So you can navigate to them. And on the subject of navigation, you can also use, of course, Eclipse bookmark support. So you can add a bookmark anywhere without entering something in the code, and it remembers that bookmark, so you can navigate to it and like, look here, this was interesting, I should look at this later. So that's yet another one of the views that you see here. All right. Let's look at references. So this thing here, bar a friend of foo, is referring to mail.password. All right, where's mail.password? Where did that come from? It's not red, so it must be there. So what I can do is that I can just place the marker on that, and I can do open declaration, or press F3. And then it knows where it found that password thing. And if I also have syncing turned on, it will also, on the left there, show me which file that is in, so I can then navigate to something, right? So it's very easy to go from a place to the place where that thing was declared. You might also want to do the reverse, because you implemented this mail thing and you were lazy and you called it passwd or something, and then you realized now it's much better to spell it out and call it password, or now we can change it to the reverse. So I want to change password to passwd, but I want to see where is this being used, and I can do that, which is the reverse, and that's find references. So in find references, because they are many, I cannot just jump to them, right? So instead I get a search view down here, and it tells me bar friend of foo is referencing this variable. All right, let's go see. All right, yeah, it does. So I have a very powerful mechanism to move around. And what I can also do when navigating, I can do that by saying open Puppet element, which is, there's a shortcut for that. But if I press this, I can, now it says, did this for mail.password, but if as I remove more and more typing here, it starts to give me an index of everything that's available, right? So I see this currently is all the things that my environment knows about that I can reference. So then I can type here and I can search for stuff I want to know. Do I have something called E with a capital E in it, right? Yeah, that thing or something else. And just click on it and navigate to it. And some of them you can't navigate to because they're part of the Puppet platform, it won't take you there. But a really quick way, and if you want to look at the source code of something, just start typing its name and it will find that for you. Okay. So Puppet also, Geppetto also understands documentation comments. You see here, there's the class here with documentation, has a bit of documentation on it. And if I hover over this class, you will see the documentation for it formatted, which is a great help when writing the documentation as well as when using it. And when you're referring to something, it also knows about that. So if you're looking at a class X that inherits with the other class here, if I hover over it with documentation here, it knows that it's a reference to the other class, and of course you're seeing the documentation for that other class. The same thing if you hover over mode, you get the documentation that is in all of the documentation from the Puppet runtime. Okay. So convenient way if you want to know the details of values and stuff. So you don't have to go and look that up. All right. What else? A bit of formatting, what it does. I have a bunch of formatting examples here. Here I have a bunch of variables and stuff with assignments. And if I format this, and I've set the parameters, Geppetto will help you format this very nicely. And it's using an algorithm. As you see, it didn't do this stupidly and just move all of these out here. Instead, it looked at like cluster sizes of things, and which sort of tabulates things nicely. So, and that is then applied to things like assignments. If you have case statements, you want them aligned, it will nicely format them for you. It will align lists with long stuff and parameters and things like this. It knows about comments and, here I turned on so you can see where the right margin is. So it knows about the width, so it can format things in the width that you've set you want to do, 80 characters by default. So it will fold long lines and stuff in comments, and it will do a little bit of magic to make comments easier to read, inserting space first and stuff like that. But you can also block special lines from being folded because they have some syntax and stuff like that. If you've done things like this, when you have a very long comment at the end of the line, it will format that nicely with like hanging comments and stuff. And if things are really badly aligned, as they are here, I don't know if you can see it, you know, many people have been working on this with tabs and then back to spaces and then 4 tabs and 4 space expansion and then 8 and back and forth, and someone forgot to put the star first because we do want to have them first and stuff like that. And then you can just format it and it understands that this is really how it should be aligned. And of course, resources, which is the most common thing everyone is writing, and you want stuff aligned. Now, this one was already formatted. I have saved something that was fixed, but you know, if we destroy this one first and then format it, it will align it. Also using the same type of cluster techniques. So if you look under Preferences and Puppet and Formatter, you can set things like indentation size and spacing and stuff like that, but mostly control how it should do breaking and aligning of things under many different conditions, how it should be dealing with comments, and you can play around with stuff here to get the sort of formatting that you like. And while we're here, we could just look at a bunch of features supported in Geppetto. There's auto edits, it auto completes parentheses and strings and stuff, which is really nice, or it drives you nuts and you want to turn them off. We support looking at things for different environments. You can just change that here. You can turn on, or you can look at some potential problems, like circular module dependencies and lots of details here. And then you can control if you want to ignore or that problem or get a warning or a hard error. So They're all configurable. And then you have the same category for more stylistic types of problems, what you want to do with them if you want to ignore, warn, or get errors. When saving, you can turn on actions, so you can have auto format on save, on trim lines, and stuff like that. Right, and then of course you can control things like the syntax coloring. If you like regular expressions to be different color or something, you can go in there and control it, or keywords and so forth. There's also template support. I don't have any template here, but if you want to have templates like for standard resources, just give those templates a name, and then you can call upon them and get them expanded and jump around in that definition. Ooh. Let's see. That's about it here. Okay. When I'm creating stuff, there are some new things I can do. I can create like empty new Puppet manifest that's just like a new file. But I can also do a Puppet module project, and when I do that, I get the project instantiated with the basic scaffolding for doing a module. I can do an empty new Puppet project, or I can go and fetch existing modules from the Forge. So and when I do that, it's contacting over the network, and speech falling a little bit, but it should be getting here. There's more and more modules on the Forge, so this takes, now it's making me nervous. No, but there it is. All right. And so these are modules coming from the Forge. So I'm gonna pick something from Puppet Labs, or has anyone published a module? No? No module publishers here? Eric. Sorry? DNS query. All right. DNS. There it is. It found it on DNS. So Eric Dahlén, DNS query. Let's 004, right? So, all right. I want that, and I call it DNS. Does it depend on a whole bunch of things? No, just standard lib, perhaps. Not even that. All right, great. So let's see if we get like syntax errors and stuff. Let's see how diligently you've been working on your module. Now we have DNS query here. I'm gonna it doesn't have any manifest. How boring. Sorry? Only functions. All right. So lib, Puppet, parser, functions. All right, so DNS, so one function might be like DNS, something, lookup. All right, that's, I'm gonna open that as a text editor. DNS lookup, all right, so I'm gonna use DNS lookup now in my manifest here. In Fix Me Up. All right, never mind. So just gonna call the DNS lookup some way. I don't know what the arguments are, and it's red. And why is it red? Well, it's because I have not declared that I depend on the DNS query. Now, demo here is just, it's not a module or anything, so I can't declare the metadata here. So I'm going to use a trick here that I can, it's so big on the screen, it's hard for me to see. I'm going to say that I am going to depend here on DNS query, because I do have that now. So I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to build my project, clean my projects. And now it found DNS lookup. And did you write any documentation in it? Yeah, does a DNS lookup and returns an array of addresses. Right. On what? All right, but it does things like that for you. So if you're using a module, you can get the documentation of it and all of these things. Right. So I had standard lib here. that was pretty much what I was planning to show. Any questions at this point? Something you're wondering about? Because I was going to flip back to my presentation. We can do questions at the end too, if you like. No? All right. Okay. So now the question you should have asked was because what became of Herman, right? Or Herman Hollerith is the guy's name, right? So have you heard about Hollerith and Hollerith cards? Well, he invented them, and he invented a tabulating machine. And not only did he invent the first one, there was a whole slew of machines because you needed machines to punch the holes, and they came up with all sorts of models, and the turbo-loaded ones, and the ones that you could carry with you. You could fold the legs, and like a laptop kind of thing, and it was very modern. And he was doing terrifically, and he sold his company, or he merged with a bunch of others. And you know the company that was formed around this? IBM, yeah. And this was their first logo. Business International Machines. And Herman made lots of money. He kept the mustache, but he got the fancy hat too. So here's where you can get more information about the Geppetto. We're on GitHub. There's information on Puppet Labs too. Then what we're using also is the stuff you saw in Geppetto is also available as a service on the net in Stackhammer, which is a product. If you go to cloudsmith.com, you can try it out. What we do is we pull in projects from GitHub and from the Forge, and we do all the syntax checking and validation and things that you saw here. We also do generation of RSpec Puppet testing based on what it finds in your catalogs. You can do catalog comparisons, get deltas on catalogs. You can deploy to Amazon machines, collect facts and data from them, and a whole bunch of other things. But that's a totally different presentation than this one. But it's doing the same things as Geppetto if you want to try that out. Otherwise, just download Geppetto and have a go at it. Okay? Questions? No, you want beer. I get it. Thank you very much.